Hello and welcome to the Secrets of a Ghostwriter. My name is Tony Horne, and after 25 years of breakfast radio in the north of England, I've now ghostwritten more than 25 books. Many of the skills learnt in broadcasting are transferable to the printed word. Storytelling, obviously, the ability to listen within a conversation. Picture painting is very important. Emotional connection, interaction, the list goes on. I also have a degree in modern languages from Exeter, Rome, and Padova universities in Italy. You might spot a theme here. Words are all I have. Now, today I'm going to tell you about some of the stories I have ghostwritten, and I'll tell you a little bit about how the magic works as an introduction to ghostwriting. But first, let's take a look at these 6 people. Okay, so you're ahead of me. You're already asking, how am I related to these people? How are these people in my portfolio? Well, I will talk you through them very shortly. But first, one of the most common questions I get asked as a ghostwriter is, what is ghostwriting? So I write books for people who can't. That is the very simple answer. These are mostly memoirs for people who don't have the know-how or ability, they lack confidence or have time management issues, or they might just be lazy. Celebrities and ordinary people with extraordinary stories, often for people who chase their 15 minutes of fame through perhaps TV talent shows, or those who found themselves with 15 minutes of fame thrust upon them because they happened to wander into someone else's story and their lives changed forever. Innocent bystanders. The more complicated answer to what is a ghostwriter is this. So without any professional accreditation, I morph into a psychiatrist, a confidant, a lawyer, a publishing guru, a therapist, a journalist, all of those things as the process begins. And many of my clients say to me at some point, do you know, I've never told anyone else this. They've been storing it up for years. So that's a sign that you're doing a really good job, because trust is, of course, key. Other people say to me, you know, I don't care if I sell just one book. I just want to go on the record. My response? Could you please care if you sell more than one book, and therefore go on the record to as many people as possible so your story outlives you? So let's get back to the screen and look at some of the people whose stories have become a massive part of my life. Okay, so normally when I ask people who this is, the response is really disappointing, especially because 20 million people watched him win a Pride of Britain award. When I put this picture up, it starts to come flooding back. So this is MOAT, the gunman who went on the rampage in July 2010 in Newcastle-Upon-Tyne in the northeast of England. The man in the previous image, you know now, was his 3rd victim and often forgotten. You've probably not remembered either that on the 3rd of July 2010, MOAT hunted out his ex-girlfriend, Sam Stobbart, and her new boyfriend, Chris Brown. The following evening, he shot and blinded PC David Rathband. As David lay there in his car, hanging on to life and trying to reach for the police radio in the roof of the vehicle, somebody recognized his gasping voice and turned to his colleague. "That's Tango 190, he said, which was David's call sign. And that became the title of our book, which became the 2nd bestseller for the publisher, Bite Back Publishing, released 1 year to the day upon which David was slain. Now, darts. As a ghostwriter, you can be a one-trick pony. And I have, thanks to David, become pretty much a true crime specialist, but I'd like to show some versatility as well. This picture is the bulldog. There ain't no darts without a nickname. Long before you loot littlers, bulldog is Shane Burgess, former world darts #1. But only for 24 hours. He lost his ranking during a transatlantic flight when someone else was playing and he happened to be flying. This book is called Everybody Gets 15 Quid because when he first turned up to play for England, he put in his expenses and loss of income from his day job, which they still had back then. And he was handed an envelope. Mystified, he asked what was in it. Everybody gets 15 quid, he was told. There's a good lesson about this darts book. It's not really about darts. It's all about the bits in between. Sports books need highs and lows and personal battles. Anyone can look up your form guide, but if you want to know what really goes on tour, read this. It's about living in a camper van, shooting rabbits before a match, and knocking back cocktails in Vegas with your opponent, so many that neither could barely shoot an arrow that night. This is your guy. This is Bulldog. This is Shane Burgess, and everyone gets 15 quid. Louis Walsh famously described him as looking like Fred West. But this is the first winner of the X Factor from 2004. It's Steve Brookstein. Much derided, he has a great story of how the now disgraced and deceased Max Clifford rang him up and told him, talk to the press and we'll bury you. Well, they buried him anyway in favour of the runners-up G4, if you remember them. This book is as much about the dirty tricks and manipulation that went on behind the scenes of the biggest TV show of the time. Nobody has ever blown the lid on it quite like Steve. Getting Over the X is a terrific title for Steve's book. He came up with that. It got to number 15 out of then 6 million books on Amazon, Christmas Day 2014, released 10 years on from his victory. Sadly, some people feel that he didn't quite get over the X. At this point, you might well ask me how I extract these stories from people. Well, I ask each of my clients before we start to write down perhaps 20 bullet points from their story. Bullet points, not paragraphs. I'll do that. Then we video conference 3 times a week for about 90 minutes, couple of hours, and we talk and we talk and we talk. That process lasts about 3 months. Then I go away and do the magic for 4 months. What am I looking for in those conversations? Well, simple, really simple. Action and emotion. What happened and how did you feel? One without the other is essentially just a list. So shortly, I'm going to show you how those bullet points work and we shape the story from it. Okay, who's next? This is Kenny Thomas, with whom I wrote Bearing My Soul and Bearing More of My Soul. Kenny had a few soulful hits like Thinking About Your Love, You're Hurt, I'm Hurting Too. And that story has enormous merit. But with ghostwriting, there is often that story behind the story. And Kenny's daughter, Christina, was given round about 6 months to live. Now, obviously, that rocked his world and his family's world. He looked outside the National Health Service in Britain for help. He looked to Germany, Mexico, India. 7 years later, she's still alive. Kenny had so much soul to bear, we actually did write a further 6 chapters for the paperback to update his story and Christina's story. Next, the 2 most famous serial killers in British history. Ian Brady, Myra Hindley. So much has been written, broadcast, and podcast about the Moors murders. It is the classic in this true crime genre. People born well outside of its time frame are still fascinated by the grim, dark details of this horrible, horrible story. But what happens when the brother of one of the victims, Leslie Ann Downey, still unable to express himself half a century later, hands you original letters those two sent the family from prison? Well, you've got a story. Terry West was meant to take his 10-year-old sister Leslie Ann to the Boxing Day Fair of 1964. On that day, he was too poorly to go, so she went alone and never came home. You can understand why his book is called If Only. Finally, who is this guy? A regular on our TV screens for over 50 years, it's BBC World Affairs editor John Simpson. Now, John persuaded his bodyguard and undercover cameraman, Craig Summers, to write his own memoir. So let's just rewind and go back to those bullet points I mentioned a few moments ago. Craig's read like this. Bombed in Iraq by the Americans, friendly fire. Tsunami 2004, first TV crew in Banda Aceh, Indonesia. Brings back the body of a dead BBC producer from Mogadishu, Somalia. Buys children from the Bulgarian mafia, smuggles weapons through customs at Dover, infiltrates Indian call centers and buys your data, my data, and everyone else's personal data on a memory stick for about £8. And so it starts. Really simple but effective bullet points. Easy, therefore, to generate a conversation. And from just that and a few more other headlines, we wrote 127,000 words in 86 days, delivering Bodyguard, My Life on the Front Line. Again, for Bite Back Publishing. So, the story for Craig is a little bit James Bond, but it's also a very real account of how broadcasters keep on getting the story against enormous risk. It's probably one of my top 3 favorite projects that I've worked on. There is a taster of some of the books that I have ghosted and a little insight too into the process. There's plenty more to come. First, any questions?